Somebody's live going through papers.
Is there something specific we're waiting on to start the meeting?
I think we're all set, Chuck. Go ahead.
I don't see everybody up though. Okay. All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Because of COVID-19, we continue to have our virtual meetings via Zoom. And what we've learned is that Zoom is a nice program, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect for the people who are attending the meeting, and also not perfect for the city or the board members. Because we are having a virtual meeting, we have changed our procedures. Thus, I would ask we follow some basic parliamentary procedures. First of all, speakers must be acknowledged by the chairperson prior to speaking. Board members can do this by physically raising their hand on their screen. For members of the public, we ask that you use the raise hand feature within Zoom at the appropriate time. Now, you may run into a problem on that feature, and if you can't get your hand to raise, scan it with your mouse, and that should, because apparently it can go to sleep. Those of you who are attending this meeting using a cell phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 on your phone. Let me repeat that. If you're on a cell phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. Second, we keep our comments succinct and to the point for the benefit of a productive meeting. Third, all voting will be done in the form of roll call votes. Fourth, when a member of the public is recognized, the member of the public will be unmuted and will be asked to state his or her name and address before speaking. So with these understandings, I ask for your patience and cooperation as we handle tonight's business. I want to thank you in advance for cooperating. Board members are all volunteers. We are appointed by the City Commission. We serve 3-year terms, and they're staggered term. We hear 3 types of matters. First is what we call a dimensional variance. And in order to get a dimensional variance, the petitioner is required to show a practical difficulty and get 4 affirmative votes in favor of the requested variance. The second type of matter that we hear is what's called a use variance. The standard is higher. The applicant is required to show a hardship and get 5 affirmative votes in favor of granting the use variance. And then finally, the third type of decisions, the appeals that we hear are decisions of city officials or other boards, and the applicant must establish an abuse of discretion and get 4 affirmative votes to overturn the decision of the city official or one of the other boards. Our procedure is that a presentation is made by the Community Development Department. The board members are given an opportunity to question the person from the Community Development Department. After that, the petitioner is allowed to speak. We allow one person to speak on behalf of the petitioner unless there's some technical information that we need that the petitioner can answer. Once the petitioner has made his or her presentation, then board members are given an opportunity to question the petitioner. Then we open it up for public comment. So those of you who are in the audience who want to make public comment, this was when you hit the button to raise your hand or *9 if you're on your cell phone. And when we have public comment, again, we ask the speaker to state his or her name and address, indicate whether they're in favor or opposed to the appeal, state the reasons why they're for or against the appeal. All comments are directed to me, not to the petitioner. Each speaker shall have no more than 3 minutes to comment. And each speaker will be allowed to speak once at to a specific appeal. After we have all public comment, then the petitioner or applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to all public comments. Once public comment is closed, we take no further comments from the public or the applicant unless so requested by a board member. And then a motion is made either to grant or deny the requested variance. All right, now we're going to take roll call. First, we're going to take roll call of the board.
Charles Lowley.
Here.
Jason Kempster.
Here.
Kevin Hart.
Here.
Richard Lilly.
Here.
John Miller.
Here.
Eric Morgenroth. Eric Morgenroth.
He's on mute.
Okay, I see him. Francis Rodriguez.
Here. Sorry.
Is Francis Rodriguez here?
No.
No. Okay. Jerry Attia?
No.
Okay. And Ron Reddy.
There's a Jerry Attia on the screen with a mute on it.
Right, but he's extra. We have 8 here tonight, so he was just sticking around in case we had a shortfall. But we got 7 members here, 7 board members here, so we have a full board. We can proceed. Okay, now I'm going to take roll call for the appellants. Is there somebody here for 1535 Maryland? Please raise your hand.
I know it doesn't look like he has a microphone, but I know he's on there.
All right. Is there somebody here for 220 North Lawn?
Here.
Okay. And 515 Westwood.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Okay, board members, you have before you the minutes of the July 14th meeting. Are there any corrections? Does anybody have any? I have 2 corrections. Okay, Mr. Lilly.
On page 5, top paragraph, first line, the person's name is Glenda Meads with a D, not Means. That's it.
Okay, any other corrections? All right, I've got a couple. They're just typos. On page 10, 691 Oak, 1, 2, third paragraph down, it starts with Regina Greer and Hoyt Fredericks owners were present on behalf of the, it should be petitioner. And then on page 11, second paragraph, Mr. Morgenroth said he wanted to get on the record that he thought the commission. So this is missing a T.
Sorry, quick question. The one on page 10, it says, what does it say instead of petitioner?
It says petition.
Okay.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
Motion to accept with changes.
Okay. So motion's been made by Mr. Lilly and seconded by Mr. Canvasser to approve the minutes as corrected. Call the roll, please.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Eric Morgenroth,
Yes.
Ron Reddy.
Yes. Okay. Minutes have been approved as corrected. Okay. So now we're going to go to appeal 1535, appeal number 20-50. It's 1535 Maryland, appeal 20-.
This is Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-35, property known as 1535 Maryland. Request the following variance to construct a new detached garage. Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.03B of the zoning ordinance requires that an accessory building shall not be permitted closer to the principal building on an adjoining lot than the sum of the minimum required side yard setbacks. The minimum total side yard setbacks are 14 feet or 25% of the lot width, whichever is greater. The required total is 18.25 feet. The proposed is 12 feet. Therefore, a variance of 6.25 feet is being requested. The applicant is requesting a variance to construct a detached garage in the place of the existing one that got demolished. As you see here, they're 4 foot off the side yard setback and 7.5 off the rear setback. The 7.5 is due to a DTE easement because the power lines are about 1.5 feet in on the property line, therefore a 6 foot easement, which is typical for DTE. It's pushing the garage forward. And then you can see the 12-foot distance between the neighboring house to the south to the proposed garage. And should you have any questions?
Yeah, you want to go just sort of give the history of what happened here?
Sure. They applied for a permit to reconstruct the garage. The garage got demolished, and in that process, it got realized that the accessory structure was only 12 feet, not the required 15.25 feet away from the house to the south. And then that's why they're here tonight, looking for the variance to put the garage back in the same location as the existing one that was there. And then for the variance of the 6.25 feet. The house to the south was constructed, was completed in 2004. With that house to the south, you could build a house closer. You got to maintain the distance from the principal building, which they did, and there's nothing in the ordinance that says the garage, the house being constructed needs to be that same 25% away from the accessory structure. With the proposed garage being constructed, with it being demolished, the zoning ordinance says that you have to maintain that 25% distance away from the principal building. And with it being demolished, that's why they're here tonight asking for the variance.
Okay, so when they put in if they get their variance, they're planning to put the south wall where the former south wall used to be of the garage that was removed.
Correct.
Okay, and so there's sort of an inconsistency in the ordinance where a house can be built close to an accessory building, but an accessory building can't be built close to a house, right?
Correct. And then through the final review, that's where it was picked up that these proposed garage was being closer to the adjacent house, and that's why we're here tonight.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, a couple. Is the garage to the south conforming?
The garage to the south is actually attached, so it is conforming.
Okay. All right, that was number one. Number two, is there any reason they couldn't move the garage to the north to avoid the necessity for a variance?
I think moving it to the north, you'd have to move it quite a bit to be able to get turned in, and with the distance from the house to the garage and with the DTE easement, it'd be pretty difficult.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
All right. Before I go to Mr. Morgenroth, on moving the garage, were you talking about just moving it north or pivoting it so that they would enter from the south?
Pivoting it would make it, depends how it sits, it almost has to be looked at. It could be closer to the house and it still may affect the DP easement. I think either way there'd be some issues with making that move. Doing a side entry garage would be difficult because they'd be able to turn in. You'd be pushing that garage further in the backyard to get a proper clearance to make that turn to get into the garage.
Okay. Mr. Morgenroth, you have a question.
A few questions. So the house in question that's the 12 feet away, you said that is conforming? It's not in a non-conforming position?
That is conforming when it was constructed.
Is it conforming now?
Yeah, so it meets the distance between, because that lot is a little bit narrower.
Right.
It conforms to the house next to it because it keeps the distance, the proper distance from that. And with it being pushed back into the property, and then when it was built, it conformed with the accessory structure. And now being flipped around, building the accessory structure, it can't be closer to the house.
Right. And was the old garage, is this dimension on the original plot plan 16? Is that a dimension where it was a 16-foot wide garage? I'm guessing this one looks more rectangular. I didn't open up the print, but this garage is wider, correct?
Yeah, they increased the size of the garage a little bit, which still meets the zoning ordinance for the R2. And with everything else on it, it meets the zoning ordinance other than the distance from the adjacent property.
Because the old garage was actually a one car.
Correct.
And if they hadn't demoed the garage completely and just tried to expand this garage into a 2-car garage, would they have still needed a variance?
Yeah, because then you'd be messing with changing the roof line and you'd still be affecting that wall to some degree with the roof, and it would still be in the same predicament.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Or Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, I'm sorry. One more question. One of the things you said I want to just go back on. They pulled a demo permit. Did the city approve these plans in conjunction with the pulling of demo permit, or are those handling completely separate?
The demo permit is issued once everything really gets to the point where the building permit can be issued. Right at the last look, then it was realized the house and the distance between, it was kind of caught at the last minute right after the demo permit was already issued and the garage was demolished.
Okay, so the garage was already demoed before this became an issue.
Correct. It got caught right at that time, and then at that point it was already removed.
Yeah, but the demo permit isn't dependent on the building permit, correct? You can demo something without having a building permit.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Who's going to speak?
But you have one from John. You have one from John Miller.
Oh, I can't see him. He's not up. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yes. Mr. Zilke, basically, the plan doesn't show the outline of where the existing garage was, but I'm assuming that the new garage is in the same position as the old garage was, except it's expanding to the north a little bit into their backyard to accommodate 2 cars instead of a 1.5-car garage. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
Okay. But otherwise, once again, it's in that same position as the old garage was in relation to the house to the south and to the backyard.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Johnson. Oh, I assume there's no more questions, but the problem is I can't see all the board members.
I think, do you have gallery view or speaker view, or can you expand your screen and make it a little wider? You know, you can drag it over.
I expanded. Okay, there's an arrow here. Let me see what that does.
It's usually gallery view.
Oh, is that?
I think it's just more expanding the screen on your monitor. You can.
Okay, here's gallery view. All right. I got everybody now.
Got it? Okay.
Well, most everybody. Kevin's in Mr. Hart's in 2 spots, but okay. All right. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Let me see here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we get a video?
They got on YouTube.
The host has asked you to start your video. Okay. There I am.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Very good. Yes. Thanks. Well, actually, as Jeff has said, I'm in quite a pickle here. Our intent, obviously, was we had a 1.5 car garage. We just wanted to make it a little bit wider to make accommodations for a 2-car garage. We weren't doing anything unusual like putting apartments on top or anything. Just the old garage was, due to come down, aluminum siding. It wasn't in perfect shape, and so we wanted to spruce up our house and put in a new garage and put on siding and make it look nice. We weren't trying to change anything on the south property line that adjoins the neighbor, and nor were we trying to push it back against our fence where the power line is on the east side. Obviously, when we found out that after we had taken down the garage that we were in a pickle trying to put the new garage back up again, it was really a shock. Talk to our neighbors. Our neighbors have no objection to it. And their house, when they built it, their house is 52 feet deep, and it came close to our garage. However, their windows are 14 feet to the west of where the garage will start. So there's no obstruction of view to our neighbor's windows. He doesn't lose any light or anything like that in his windows. He also built a fence, 6-foot high vinyl fence that goes from the south property line westward along his south property line and stops at where my garage is going to be, proposed to be built. And that fence has been there for, maybe 10, 15 years. So the neighbor has no objection whatsoever. He's totally fine with it. And it doesn't impede or hurt his property at all. The other thing, we've looked at various plans to change the thing. The problem, if we move it further into our backyard because of the diagonal line, it's not just 6 1/4 more feet that we would have to move it to equal that 18 1/4. Because of the power lines pushing the garage closer to the west side, it actually would have to be moved 11 feet from our property line to equal that 18 1/4 feet from the neighbor's property. So the point being is that our driveway comes in and it's 10 feet wide. If we did that, it would require a full 90-degree turn around to the north from our driveway, and then another 90-degree turn to the east to get a car into the garage, and there's not enough space. We have checked out the turning radiuses of cars and the average car anywhere from 11 to 17 feet, and it wouldn't happen. So virtually we would not be able to rebuild the garage, even to put back a 1.5 car garage, what we had before. It would just be unworkable. So as Jeff said, you can build a house close to the garage. When we first bought the property, this wasn't an issue. The neighbor moved in after the fact. It's not a safety issue because you can build the house next to the garage as opposed to the garage next to the house. And since he's not objecting and we're not obstructing anything of any view out of his windows or whatever, and with the fence, I respectfully ask for the approval to build what was approved as a construction plans to the building department.
All right. How about what you want to address? You talked about moving the garage north and having to turn left and then turn right to get into the garage. How about taking the garage and pivoting it so you enter the garage from the south side?
Well, we looked at a lot of those options, and doing that, you would have, because of the turning radius of the average car, you would have to move the garage virtually into the center of the property, because for a compact car, the turning radius is 11 feet. For an average size car, it's 17 feet. So if you came up our driveway and then had to turn, you would have to move the garage virtually 20 feet into our back from our property line. And then the garage is 22 feet deep. So you're looking 40 feet into our backyard. We just couldn't do it. I mean, we would have no yard. I mean, we'd just be looking out our windows at this structure that's sitting in the middle of our backyard.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Morganroth.
Yes. So you just described the home I live in Birmingham, that my garage is in the center of my back property, and I drive down my narrow driveway and I have to make that turn. And it isn't always an easy turn. So I get that. With regard to the permit, you kind of said what was approved. At the time that you pulled the demo permit, was your assumption you were approved? Had you received an approval?
I had received an email approval stating that, and I believe I sent everybody a copy of that, saying your construction permit is approved and it's in our office, but you need to apply for a demo permit and take the building down before you can get the construction permit. So yes, it was approved.
And then with regard to the existing or the old garage wall on the 1.5 car, you really are replacing that location for the current wall. So if you'd chosen to remodel this garage and make it wider, you would have been coming in for a variance on an existing non-conforming garage you want to remodel. Is that correct? That the space
if I had known what I know now, I would not have made a 2-car garage. I would have just spruced up the siding on the existing garage and let it be at a 1-car garage, 1.5-car garage. I would never have gone through this. You know, we pride ourselves in nice backyard, beautiful Birmingham and all that. And we couldn't fathom doing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, just help answer Mr. Morganroth's question. That is accurate. The building department had reviewed the plans for the proposed detached garage. It had met the zoning requirements at that time to where the appellant was told we have to demolish the existing garage first before we can issue the permit for the new garage. That is typical. It's what we do with all demolitions, especially for single family homes. It was at the time that the garage was in the process of being demolished that staff reviewing the plan then noticed the distance between the proposed garage and the existing house to the south that there was that issue. So the appellant was told at that time that the plans were approved, they needed to demolish the garage. The building permit for the detached garage wasn't issued at that time. It was just noticed kind of after the fact, after the initial zoning review was completed. The deficiency and the distance between was not noticed until the existing garage was demolished.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner? I don't see any hands up. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to comment on this appeal? Okay, Chet. He's on an iPhone. Let's raise his hand. Where's Chet?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Chet. My address is 31360 Pierce Street. There we go. I am just here to show support for this request and in favor of the variance. It's a unique request, not only because we're having a ZBA on a Zoom meeting, but the garage is demoed prior to receiving an approval. Not the typical process. However, I ask that you consider the circumstances surrounding this request and provide an approval this evening if possible. So I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you. So you live on Pierce?
Yes, sir.
And this property's on, your property doesn't butt up to this property, right?
No, it does not.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? All righty. Someone want to make a motion? Mr. Morgenroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding case 1535 Maryland, case number 20-35, requesting a variance for side yard setbacks, the distance between structures of a 6.5 or 6.25 feet is being requested. I move to approve. I feel like this is a unique circumstance, notwithstanding the misunderstanding with the approval of the permit and the approval of the demo permit. I do believe that if the applicant was aware of the zoning issue and he had come in front of me to do a existing non-conforming expansion to the garage, that I likely would have considered that reasonable because that wall was already existing non-conforming and we couldn't have necessarily torn it down on our own. So we would have had to work with him. In addition, the replacement garage is not creating a more extreme nonconformity. And I think due to the circumstances that the client has or the applicant has a right to use this property to its fullest and have a garage, and that would be substantial justice for him. I believe, and I do believe in some ways this is not self-created, in that he went through the proper process to figure this out. And he might have approached it differently, as he mentioned, by just remodeling if he had known about the distance between structures. So for that reason, I move to approve.
Is there a second? Mr. Canvasser, seconded. Okay. Motion's been made by Mr. Morgenroth, seconded by Mr. Canvasser to grant the requested variance. Are there any comments? Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I will also support the motion. And as Mr. Morgenroth stated, I think that despite the question of the granting of permits and when the garage came down, I think that this request in general is very reasonable. And I think that it would certainly do substantial justice to the property owner and the adjacent properties. And that's why I would support this motion also.
Okay, any other comments? I am going to support the motion because I think this is a unique situation in the sense that first of all, you got the utility easement along the back, which is taking up part of the space. And then we have the situation where the two adjoining lots are not the same width. So that also causes a problem. Plus we have the inconsistency in the ordinances between building a house close to a separate structure and not vice versa. So for those reasons, I would grant the requested variance. Anybody else? All right. So the motion is to grant the variance as advertised. Call the roll, please.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart, Kevin Hart.
Yes.
Okay. Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Ron Reddy.
Yes.
Okay, you have your variance. You can build your garage. Okay. Calling appeal 2036, 220 North Lawn.
This is Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-36, property known as 220 North Lawn. Request the following variances to construct an addition to an existing non-conforming home. Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.08.2 of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum rear yard setback to be 30 feet. The proposed is 16.19 feet, therefore a variance of 13.81 feet is being requested. Variance 2, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.08.2 of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum combined front and rear setback is to be 55 feet. The proposed is 45.74 feet. Therefore, a variance of 9.26 feet is being requested. The applicant is requesting variances to construct an addition to the existing non-conforming home. This home, as you can see, the garage is off to the left. And there's a breezeway which is currently attached, the existing garage. And he's proposing, if we look at the next slide, creating a living space by linking creating this mudroom, tying the garage and the rear yard flush with the front of the garage and the rear of the garage, which is still under the existing roof line, so there's no change to the footprint. He's just expanding out and remodeling that and making a living space from where the existing non-conforming aspects are currently in this property. Should you have any questions?
How much of it, the increasing the non-conformity, if we were to grant the variance, how much would the increase would there be?
None, because the roof line's already over that breezeway with the porch, and over the back, they're just building underneath that existing roof line.
Okay, and the fact that they're already in the rear setback, that's causing that's necessitating the variance under B, right?
The rear setback is variance A. It's because that's 16.19 foot.
Right. Because of that's actually driving the variance for the other two, right?
The other one, yes, because then you don't have the total combined.
Okay, and so we're very protective of the rear setback, but this is already there, and they're not expanding that, correct?
Correct. The breezeway, my understanding, the appellant purchased this house with the breezeway already connected, and it wasn't really heated, and he just wants to remodel that inside portion. But the garage is already existing at the 16.19 foot. The existing non-conforming is already existing.
Any other questions for Mr. Silke? All right, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Hi, Tommy Farida here. So, I actually live at the house on the west side, right, of the butting up to the house on the west side right now at 280 North Lawn. And really, I was just trying to downsize. And when I bought the house, I I mean, there's really not much. I saw that the structure was already there, and I pretty much just wanted to keep it under the current footprint of the house. I'm moving a staircase, and the current house has a laundry room downstairs. I really just wanted to move it upstairs so it was more of a ranch style house. I mean, and I'm really just not doing anything under the changing the footprint of the house. I just wanted to really winterize that area, add some plumbing.
Okay, so in the case of the north plane of the house, all you're doing, instead of having the bump out south on the breezeway, you're the garage and the rest of the house, it's going to be one straight line, right? You're not. Yeah,
and I'm going to brick it up and completely enclose it, and then I'm pretty much going to whitewash the brick to make it all look like just one house without a breezeway.
The southern part of the breezeway, you just bring it down to the line of the garage, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Morgenroth.
So I guess I want to point out, as much on the record as I am asking the question, but the two walls of the home that are currently non-conforming are not being touched, which is the front of the home and the rear of the home. The expansion that you're doing to the breezeway to even both sides out with the outside walls of the home really are not an issue, whether you could step them in 1 foot or something to minimize any kind of encroachment, because they're not the issue. The issue, what you're doing in your expansion doesn't modify, increase, or decrease the nonconformity. You aren't touching the nonconforming walls. So you really just need permission to do any work to your house simply because you are nonconforming. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the petitioner? All right. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this appeal? I don't see any hands. Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion? Mr. Morgenroth. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Mr. Miller was. Yeah, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Yeah, motion to approve 220 North Lawn, case 2036. I believe simply that the problem was caused by the existing home's nonconformity, and the addition requested is not increasing that nonconformity at all. It seems to be a very reasonable addition, and would actually barely be apparent visually from the front or the back of the house. The front of the house will still be 5 feet further forward than where this expansion is being proposed. So I think it's a very reasonable request, and I would tie approval to the plans as submitted.
Is there a second? Mr. Morgenroth seconds. Okay. So motion's been made by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Morgenroth to grant the variance as advertised. Any discussion? Okay. There being none, the motion is to grant. Call the roll, please.
John Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morgenroth?
Yes.
Ron Reddy?
Yes.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
Kevin Hart? Kevin Hart? I'll come back to him. Richard Lilly?
Yes.
Charles Lilly?
Yes.
Okay, Kevin Hart? I will mark him as unknown.
Missing in action. Okay, 6 affirmative votes, so you got your variance.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to bring Kevin in. He may have been muted.
He is muted, but he's not there.
Well, we got him on 2 different spots, though, so he's got to come in.
Oh, he's on his phone.
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's your vote?
Yes.
Hey, okay. Did it. Okay. So your requested variance has been approved. Okay, I'm going to call appeal number 20-37515 Westwood. And Mr. Zilke, before you start, we have to handle a procedural matter here first. Because, as I'm sure you're going to indicate, this matter was before us in June of this year. And we have, I'm looking at page 4 of our rules of procedure, Article 3, rehearings. A says no rehearings of any decision of the board shall be considered unless new evidence is submitted which could not reasonably been presented at the previous meeting, or unless there has been a material change of fact or law. So, we can either agree to hear or decide not to hear this. So I guess I'll just start off. Is there anybody who feels there isn't sufficient information here to hear the appeal? Sufficient new information? Because what they've done is when they were here in June, they were asking for 2 variances. One was encroaching in the rear setback. They have dropped that request. So I don't see anybody raising their hand. So somebody want to make a motion to proceed? Mr. Canvasser.
Yeah, in regards to appeal 20-37, I would move to proceed with this appeal. Based on the packet of evidence presented, it appears that there has been a material change to their plans sufficient for us to consider this as a separate request.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Miller seconds. Okay, motion's been made and seconded to proceed with this appeal. We're going to call the roll.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
John Miller? John Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morganroth?
Yes.
Ron Reddy?
Yes.
Kevin Hart?
Yes.
Richard Lilly?
Yes.
Charles Lilly?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Silke, you can proceed.
All right. Jeff Silke here to present case 20-37. Property known as 515 Westwood requests the following variance to construct an addition to the existing non-conforming home. Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.61A1 of the zoning ordinance requires that a corner lot which has on its side street an abutting interior residential lot shall have a minimum setback from the side street equal to the minimum front yard setback for the zoning district in which the building is located. The required side yard setback is 22.56 feet. The proposed is 16.38 feet. Therefore, a variance of 6.18 feet is being requested. As was mentioned, they were in front of the board back in June, requesting 2 variances, the rear yard setback, and then also the similar side yard street-facing setback, which through some renditions and some changes, they were able to drop off the rear yard setback variance request and brings them here tonight to look for the side yard, street-facing side yard variance request. Should you have any questions?
What is the existing side yard setback?
The existing is sitting with that porch on the side, which is covered, which are kind of falling is at 18.38 feet, but the required is the 22.56 feet going down the street.
Right.
So it's already existing non-conforming coming out. So really from the difference is really the 2 foot in the bump with the garage on the across the front.
Is this a rectangular lot?
Fairly rectangular, a little bit obscure.
Okay, I can't. Oh, I'm looking at it on the screen, so I can't pick that up. Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner or for Mr. Zilke?
Mr. Chairman, can I just have Jeff repeat those numbers? I had trouble hearing him.
All right. The required street-facing side yard is 22.56 feet. The proposed is 16.38 feet for a 6.18 foot variance. The existing non-conforming is at 18.38 feet with the covered porch. So really be adding an additional 2 feet closer to the road, but with the average of the homes 200 feet each way, the required is the 22.56 feet. So therefore the variance of 6.18 foot is being asked for.
Okay. I do have another question about that. This house, I think that's to the west, is Bloomfield, correct?
Correct.
So do we take into consideration anything relative to that property?
That was taken in consideration with the measurements, and I know the one house to the east across Chesterfield, that's on a larger lot. And the width of that, the average of that total side yard is greater. And then the one even further to the west is actually a smaller lot, which brings that one forward. So the average of those three homes kind of got that 22.56 foot variance or the required.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Zilke, I can see the whole thing now. So the front lot line is almost 97 feet long, and the rear lot line is 102 plus. And it looks like the south lot line and the north lot line are not parallel. So if this isn't an ideal situation, but if it was a rectangular lot, they may or may not need a variance?
If it was squared up, it would be very close to not needing a variance.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Mr. Reddy.
Yeah, Jeff, is it the proposed three-car garage that's really driving the need for the variance? Because it looks like the other addition would just be, all right, it's part of an already non-conforming property, and it doesn't really add anything more to the variance that would be needed. So it looks like it's just the garage that's driving this. Is that correct?
The existing house has a three-car garage, and I know that they're adding on a spot for getting elderly parents and trying to keep the three-car garage and taking in consideration what was discussed back in June to minimize the rear yard setback and kind of fill in behind that. That's kind of where the change came. So they're trying to still maintain that three-car garage that's currently there.
Okay, because it's not crystal clear from the plans what they're trying to accomplish. So I guess I'll just wait to see what the petitioner has to say about it. Thank you.
Mr. Lilly?
Is the dotted line that's underneath the text of the garage, is that the existing front of the garage? Yeah, is that the existing front?
That is the front of the garage. Actually, I want to say I believe that is the front of that is the second floor above it. They're lining that up. The garage does offset a little bit.
Because I guess where I was going with this is, what's the existing setback from Pine Street to the existing garage versus the 0.38 feet from that bump out corner?
I don't know that exact number. I know the appellant can speak of that.
Okay.
I don't have that right in front of me.
Looks like 5 feet from the plan.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Morgenroth?
Hey, Jeff, this seems to all be coming back to me. I think I asked this question last time. Does the zoning ordinance require each bay to be separate, or could he do a two-car garage, like an 18-foot door and a single door?
With it facing the street, it would still have to be single doors. Because because you're still facing a street, garage doors facing a street would still need to be the single doors.
Because it seems like our biggest issue is this extra 2 feet where they have the double doors coming into the garage for, for easy access, although that really could be pushed down into another spot. And the fact that the 3 separate bays each require a minimum framing in between each door, and then the offset. So there's, a couple feet here or there that if that could come off, the garage would work. But you're saying they would need these 3 separate bays, so really be no way to shrink it 2 feet while maintaining the 3-car garage.
Yeah, it'd be tight. I mean, you could reduce it a little bit, and I know with filling in that back where the bedroom's at, with some suggestions from before, filling that void that was in the rear of it. I know they shrink it down to some. It'd be kind
of trying to read this plan. Is the line that the 16-foot hits the corner of the garage? Is that the location where those double doors are to the garage?
That would be the single door up in the upper right, the first garage door bay.
Right. That single door. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zilke, what would be the minimum depth for a garage?
It varies. I mean, I would think 20 foot would be the minimum. I don't think 21 is unreasonable. Depends on the size of the vehicle. I mean, I drive a full-size truck, which I know is about 19 feet, and have a little bit of room to get around it. I think that's kind of a subjective question. I mean, I think 21 feet is not unreasonable.
Okay. I mean, there's no ordinance requirement that the garage has to be a certain depth, right?
No.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Miller?
Yes, Mr. Zilke. I did notice as I walked up and down Westwood that the houses on the south side of the street were roughly, that 16 to 17 feet back off the property line. And even further east down Pine Street, the houses were about that same depth back from Pine, which accommodates a lot of side yards. But the push, it seems to me, and you can confirm this, was that there's right across the street, there's a house on a double lot, which is a little unusual for this immediate area. And that house is pushed pretty far to the north. Was that what was really pushing this average for the setback along Pine Street? Was really that house across the street was unusually far back from Pine?
Yeah, that had the double lot definitely had a lot to do with it.
And one more thing, just in terms of the conformity down Pine Street, it's really that house, again, just across the street from this one, that's outside of the set kind of setbacks and massing down Pine Street. In other ones, that one is unusually far back compared to the other houses down the street.
Yeah, that lot's definitely the larger one in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Morgenroth.
So Jeff, back to that single bay where the nonconformity where the 16 feet is. If we set that back and the only garage that was sticking out the extra 3 feet was the one on the corner, do you think that one would be, because the lot seems to spread out on that end? Does that make sense?
Let me take a quick peek here. The single bay?
Yeah, so if the single bay was combined with the bay next to it and they both were more shallow, and the only bay that had the extra depth over 20 feet was, we made the end one the single bay because of the way the lot widens out. You think they would be any further out than that 18 feet porch? You understand
No,
what
I
I mean?
don't think it really would be, because that single bay up towards the front, it recesses back the 19.6, and then with filling and everything in it, where the bump to push those double doors out and the two bays down from it.
Right.
I don't believe it'd take away a whole lot. I think
Because the lot seems to, that's, you're getting closer to where the lot is 102 instead of 96. That seems to be a part of where the narrowing is, and the angle, but maybe not.
Bruce, can you pull back up that site plan?
See how it's widening out? So like where the 2 is in the 23.2, that's where the bump out would start. Because you'd pull that one bay back even with the single bay.
I think still, even following that angle, that single bay, you're pretty close to that 16.38. Even following that angle, if you follow that perpendicular out towards that porch, it may be a little bit, but I don't know if it'd change it a whole lot.
Okay.
I think still would be a variance of some fashion. You may pull out maybe a half a foot, maybe potentially.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I need to see the screen. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? All right. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Good evening, Ron Stern from Bob Stern Building, representing Michael and Heather Dresden, the owners of 515 Westwood.
Okay, welcome. Go ahead.
As you all know, we were in front of you back in June with a different plan. We were encroaching in the rear yard. We did take that into consideration when we redid the plan. We eliminated the need for the rear yard setback. And we were able to fit the bedroom suite behind the garage now. We took your advice and we did cut down the width of the family room in order to make this all fit. In hindsight, based on the owner and the architect, this was actually a very good plan and we do like it. So I'd like to thank you for that. There is definitely a need for this bedroom, as the owner's parents will be moving in with them, moving here from Chicago to be closer with their kids and grandchildren. This will now be a family of 8, with the grandparents moving in, as well as a full-time nanny. So kind of a busy house, 9 people living in there. So they definitely need the space. The depth of the garages is definitely important. I know Mr. Morgan-Roth had some concerns on that. They do have some larger vehicles. I think an Expedition is one of them. And Mrs. Dresden is very concerned about trying to get into any sort of smaller garage with that and hitting the garage. The biggest issue here for the need of the variance is, as Mr. Miller said, the house directly across the street that sits on the double lot. They're sitting over 31 feet back. The huge house built in 1929. And basically, if that house was not in the equation or built on a single lot, we would not really need the variance that we need today. We're still maintaining the 15-foot setback that's required for a side yard. If you look down the street, there's a lot of houses, especially directly across the street. The house where the garages face each other, they're only about a little over 11 foot off the property line. As you move further down the street, there's some other houses that are all in that 11 to 12 foot range as well. We do have a letter that was submitted by that owner, Brian and Pam Ansey, that they do support this. They've been living in that house since 1992, and they at one time did an addition similar to what we're planning here. So they're in full support of this as well. Let's see what else we have. So I think that's pretty much it for what we need. Open to any questions?
Okay, you said you made the family room smaller. Is there any reason why you couldn't make it a little smaller so the 3 bays in the garage all line up?
Let me just take a look at this. You'd basically be cutting off probably another 4 or 5 foot of that family room. And as I mentioned, with 9 people in the house, having a decent sized family room, which they do not have now, they have a smaller living room. To have a room like this to gather and to have the whole family together really is a necessity for this family.
Any other questions for the petitioner? All right. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to comment on this appeal? Yes. Shelby, is it Dausch?
Yeah, hi. It's her husband, Zachary Dausch.
Okay,
and
okay.
I'm the north neighbor. We live at 533 Westwood.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that the expansion, we discussed it the other day, is a natural fit to the house and the nearby neighborhood. And we think that is not obstructive in any which way to the neighbors to the west, to Bloomfields, nor does it look out of line in comparison to the other houses in the nearby area. So we would be in approval of this expansion.
Okay. Thank you for your comments.
Sure.
Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, we're going to close public comment. Does someone want to make a motion? Mr. Miller.
Excuse me. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve 515 Westwood. And, previously my concerns were this proposed expansion was into the backyard and into the side yard. And it seemed as though it was not necessarily appropriate or really desired in terms of especially that backyard inclusion. But again, as you walk up and down the street and look at where this proposed addition would sit, I believe approval would set this house actually more in conformity with the rest of the neighborhood, with the exception of the house directly across the street. Again, the older house built in 29 that is much further back and the one that's much further out of alignment. So I think in that regard, we would kind of be doing substantial justice, not to this particular lot, but also to the neighborhood. So for those reasons, again, I move to approve and tie it to the plans as submitted.
Is there a second? Mr. Lilly. Okay, motion's been made by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Lilly to grant the variance as advertised. Any discussion? Mr. Canvasser?
Thank you. I'll support the motion for all the reasons Mr. Miller stated. I'd also note that this lot is somewhat of a regular shape, making conformity even more difficult here.
Okay. Mr. Reddy?
I think Mr. Canvasser covered my point. I was just going to add that you could argue this problem was maybe self-created, but the unique circumstances of that lot across the street, I think, mitigates that. And I also agree that the motion should be approved.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. The motion is to grant the variance as advertised. Call the roll, please.
John Miller,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart.
Yes.
Okay. You have your variance. Okay. The next thing we're going to deal with here is the letter was in our packet from one of the people who lives on Hillside. Is Mr. Fisher here? Okay, I see. Okay. All right, I'm gonna address this. So you sent in a letter on August 5th indicating that neither you nor your neighbors could raise their hands at the July meeting to express your objections. I noticed that a hand got raised today. I don't know why you couldn't raise your hands before, because the appeal afterwards, people were able to raise their hand. I don't know if you're on a cell phone, but anyhow, with your letter, you attached a copy of your June 8th correspondence, which was part of our packets for both June and July.
Right.
So even though you may not have had a chance to verbally object, the board was aware of your objection. And again, I don't know what happened, why you couldn't raise your hand, but as I indicated earlier, the Zoom is nice, but it's not a perfect modem, and people like you can have problems, and it's also caused some problems for the city too. So
can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
So I think the long and short of it is, but what ended up happening is that Matt Hutchins, my neighbor, and I both tried to get on different methods and to be heard, and neither of us worked. So notwithstanding, I think that the home, we're in favor of having a home built. I think we need to have an improvement in the neighborhood. Our major objection as a group of residents is that the home is going to be basically halfway out my driveway between the front of my house and the street. And the protection of the rear setback to what is existing today, which is I think some 30-odd feet, and then the request for variance 12 feet forward of where the house would have been without the variance seemed a little unusual. So particularly with a small garage shed on the back, almost at the property line, which is detached. So I think that the issue is, why wouldn't there be, or I guess the question, why wouldn't there be a way to look at the rear setback, as some of the other members of the board had suggested, such that either you mitigate the house, by making the house smaller, or you push it back, because I'm on a non-conforming lot as well, so that it's not sticking so far forward as you drive down hillside, this will basically be the predominant box that you will see coming from Cranbrook on hillside. So it just seems a little odd that the rear setback is so important when you look on Green Lawn, where there's basically no setback in the rear at all, which is taken into the calculation when you're looking at the neighborhood. But I have a 30-foot setback and a huge space in the front yard. So I'm in support of the house. I think that some of the suggestions the board members made last week or last meeting for maybe adjusting some of the sizes of the room up front would be interesting to look at. And I think that the setback to the rear, I don't know how much the shed affects that, or the third detached garage affects that, but it's certainly a lot of house for that lot. So that's kind of the main portion of what I wanted to ask and be heard about. And the second piece is really more of a function that we've had a lot of trouble over the last 10 years of water issues based on grading. No use of sump pumps. Now everybody had to use sump pumps, dig out a garage or dig out the basement, and there'd be so much water in it they'd have to pump it out repeatedly just to finish the building. And then the other piece is we have a lot of runoff from the elevation to the street, and so the homeowners have had to be able to put additional drainage in.
I mean, we've heard complaints from other neighbors. They're worried about the drainage, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
But see, that's not something we get into. I mean, that's something you have to deal with the city once the house is built.
And I understand that now. That you guys do that outside.
Yeah, and the other issue you're talking about, the rear setback. Well, I've been on this board for about 35 years, and I think of maybe one case where we granted a rear setback variance. I know one of the board members threw that out, but we basically don't do that. We don't invade the rear setback. We just haven't. And then the issue you've got here is sort of like the appeal we just heard, where it was pointed out the house across the street is set way back from and so it throws off the average. And we run into this on a fairly regular basis where you're looking at the average setback, and then there's one house that's off that throws the average way off. So that I wasn't here at that meeting, but I mean, I read the minutes and I listened to the hearing. So I think those things were sort of taken into consideration. So at this point in time, like I said, I'm sorry that you couldn't get in. I don't know what the problem was because it was working on the next appeal. But again, as I pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, apparently when you're with the toolbar, whatever it is at the bottom of the screen, see, I don't have that in front of me, where you go to raise your hand, that can go, the phrase was, it can go to sleep. So you have to activate it to get it to work. So I don't know whether that happened. And you said one was trying it on a cell phone. So
no, it was the same device that I'm on now. And then the only reason I really made a case of it is that my neighbor had the same problem doing, unmuting. I unmuted and he raised his hand, and neither of us got through.
Well, you can. Here's the thing: you can't unmute unless Mr. Johnson unmutes you, because that's how we're controlling it. So we can control what's going on. But once your hand is raised, then you get unmuted. So the issue is really the hand raising. So
and the only reason I'm pushing it is that my neighbor raised his hand and got nowhere as well. Okay, that's the only. And as much for me as for others, I think as we all try to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, like I say, this is the fifth month we're doing this.
I know,
and we're still learning things. And like I said, it's not a perfect system.
Agreed.
For anybody.
So any wiggle room on the front? I mean, is it 12 feet fine?
The only thing you can do now is you can go to court.
Well, I'm not that excited.
We can't go back and reopen it.
Okay.
So the only way you could get this changed at this point, you'd have to go to court.
Well, thank you for the time. Okay. I hope Well, we'll see where we go.
Thank you for your input, because we got to find out if things aren't working the way we think they're working. So I appreciate your comments and sticking around for the whole meeting.
Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there's a differentiation in the understanding of raise your hand, because as you pointed out, I can currently see 8 screens. So I can see all the board members, and then I saw Mr. Fisher. If someone thinks they're raising their hand physically, you won't see it. Whereas if they're raising their
on my screen, I did.
Well, but if they raise it electronically, I think you see it. But if someone's off on a screen that isn't being highlighted, and I raise my hand like this.
Okay. Well, okay.
So I wonder if people understand the difference between raising your hand and electronically raising your hand.
Now that could be a problem too. I don't know.
They think you see them. You don't see them. You don't have a screen of 47 people. You have a screen of maybe 8 people.
Right. No, I see
Chuck's comment.
I see all the board members, and that's all I see.
Right. So unless it's a physical raise, unless they're using the app to raise their hand, you aren't going to see the physical raise that you see me do like this.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do get the instruction
on how to do it, right?
Raise their hand on the screen. So,
hard to say.
Mr. Counselor, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, since I led that meeting, that, I think there is probably some technical glitches here with Zoom. It's not a perfect system, but we can see the board members in the city when they're presenting, but to the public, we only see their names, if that. But I did try to give everybody sufficient time to use the raise hand feature as part of the app. And I know some people were able to successfully do that throughout the course of the day.
Right. So I assume you see somebody's name here, like we'll say, I'll just take Mr. Zilke. If he was to raise his hand, it appears on the screen. I don't see him. And the other thing we do here is we like to see the petitioner speaking, but basically anybody from the public making comments, we never see them. I mean, this was unusual to see Mr. Fisher here, but that's because he had raised an issue, and apparently he was allowed to appear on the screen as opposed to just talking.
Right.
Okay. So now we sort of covered the public comment, but is there anybody else here that's attending this meeting that would like to discuss something that wasn't heard at one of the meetings here tonight? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn? Mr. Lilly, is there a second? Mr. Morganroth. Okay, motion's been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Call the roll, please.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart, Charles Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Kevin Hart.
Okay.
Okay.
The meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.